Good morning, friends and enemies. In today's video, we are going through all the wide receivers that you could possibly be starting in fantasy football for week 11. We're going to go game by game, and I'm going to rank all of them as sits, starts, or flex options for y'all. And I am starting to get quite sick since returning from Berlin. So if you hear a lot of sniffles, if I sound not terrific, it's because I'm not terrific right now. So I will power through and we will dominate this video for y'all, but I apologize for all the extra background noise you're going to hear coming out of my head. Let's jump right into the first matchup, the Jets at New England for tonight's Thursday Night Football. New England, 12.5-point favorites at home in this one, 43.5-point total. If we look at the practice reports real quick, they will be without Ramondre Stevenson, Kayshon Boutte, Austin Hooper as well. So uptick for Hunter Henry and most of the pass catchers in general. And then, of course, Garrett Wilson is out for this game. Seems like everybody else is either questionable or playing in this one. Stephon Diggs, been a very high target share earner, plays well with Boutte, without Boutte, and Drake May is playing top of his game. The Jets defense obviously is not a good one. They are one that you could pass all over. They are dry right now, meaning they are sauceless. No more Gardner. Their best cornerback is out of there. Diggs, to be honest with you, I'm throwing him right into the feels good category, despite his line not being too high in Vegas at 57.5. Maybe it's more of an indictment on the fact that they don't think they're going to need to pass the ball a lot. When the game is a 43.5-point total and a team is projected to win by 12.5 points, it's typically what we call the domination here. Outside of Diggs, I mean, you have a bunch of guys that I probably don't want to have in my lineups. Demario Douglas is really only running 40% of the routes. Matt Collins had some big plays last week and is running about half the routes, as is Kyle Williams, had the really big play. I don't think you're going to get any consistency out of them. So to be honest with you, I think I might be okay with throwing Matt Collins in a lineup if it's in a very, very deep league because the matchup is great. But I think I'd probably throw all these guys into the rather not for the most part. Maybe we'll see Adonai Mitchell suit up for the first time. He was not playbook ready in week 1, but now that Garrett Wilson is out, we could see him in the game. Vegas has him at 1.5 receptions. So obviously we're not going to throw him into our lineups right away, but he is someone to stash to see what happens in the game tonight. Moving on to Washington at Miami, we've got the Spain game Sunday morning. Jaden Daniels going to be out for this one. Terry McLaurin going to be out for this one. That's really it, but a great matchup for the Dolphins against this Washington Commanders defense. As you can see, their pass D is horrendous. Number 3 in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Single most EPA per pass allowed to opponents on the season. So Jalen Waddle, again, without Tyreek Hill, he's just a must-start week in and week out. Deebo Samuel has a good matchup on paper against the Dolphins here. He did get into the end zone, and they do force feed him a lot of plays, but I'd be lying if I said I feel good about him at this point just because of the makeup of the Washington offense without Jaden Daniels, without Terry McLaurin. They're just not playing well at all. So Deebo is going to be in the dub flex category. I think you can make the case for Malik Washington possibly being in the shaky flex, catching some balls, having a decently high floor and full PPR, but yeah, he's going to go into the rather not. And then there's no one else I want to have in my lineup from this game. It's an easy one to get in and get out of. Carolina at Atlanta. The Falcons are 3.5-point favorites. They're at home, 42.5-point total, so expected to be relatively low scoring. Penix has not looked great, but Drake London has looked phenomenal week in and week out. Continues to get it done against tough opponents, easy opponents, doesn't matter. Drake London's in your lineup, of course. Tedero McMillan, very high target share, but with Bryce Young under center, they're just not throwing the ball much. And the Falcons defense right now is a little bit more of like a run funnel. They get dominated on the ground at this point, and they're much tougher to pass the ball against. We have good safety play, good cornerback play. So with Tet, I mean, he's very, very likely going to be in your lineup, but it is a tough matchup. I'm going to throw him into the feels good category. I do think he should likely be in your like wide receiver 2 or 3 role for this week. Wednesday's practice report, we have a bunch of players as DNPs, but that's pretty much going to be the case with a lot of veterans on Wednesdays across the league. So hard to get too deep into the injury reports on Wednesday. The Darnell Mooney saga here this year has been absolutely dreadful. He's been terrible the last few weeks. We've just heard a report that he actually broke his collarbone in the summer when they just told us it was just like a shoulder injury, which led to him missing a lot of time in the beginning of the season. And obviously it's just affected him overall. But yeah, besides Drake London, besides Tet, there's no one that you want to have in your lineup. I'm sure now is the week that everybody's fully off Darnell Mooney. I'm sure he'll have an explosion game. But yeah, everybody's going to go into the rather not category for right now. Chicago at Minnesota, the next game up. Minnesota 3-point favorites at home. It is a high total, 48.5 points, because Chicago defense is problematic for their offense. Justin Jefferson, his line's at 5.5 receptions, 72.5 receiving yards. I actually think JJ McCarthy is going to have a pretty good game. This is a great defense to go against if you need to like get right. And if we look at the practice reports here, do we have anyone ruled out so far? Nope. DNPs across the board for a lot of the receivers in Chicago, but again, that tends to be these veteran rest days. DJ Moore is coming off of a shoulder injury from last game, so we'll have to keep a clear eye on whether or not he practices on Thursday. If we start to rack up DNPs, there's a decent chance that he could miss this game, but I would lean towards him playing because he did return to the game last week. Jefferson right now, my rankings, I think is like the wide receiver 8 or 9. I'm not too pressed about it. The matchup is really good. Rome Odunze, he's been very, very up and down recently, and the Vikings pass defense is pretty ferocious, as you can see right across the board there. Bottom 7 in terms of fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position on the year, and bottom 5 in terms of EPA per pass allowed. So Rome's a dude that I feel relatively good about. He continues to be the highest targeted player in this offense, one that is getting better and better by the weeks. And it does seem like when Caleb kind of scrambles out, Rome's the guy he looks for, and I could see Minnesota really getting to him via the pass rush here. So ultimately, you know, it's not a great matchup, but I really like Rome. Think he's a great player. Him and Caleb have a lot of good chemistry here. So I'm going to throw him into the feels good category. As you can see, you know, I don't do my rankings based off these lines. They're obviously one piece of the picture. I just kind of go off the field and who I would start over other players. But you do start to see the batches of like, okay, the feels good guys are usually between 50 and 65 yards. The must starts are north of 70 yards in Vegas, and the dub flexes are usually within 45 and 55 yards, and varying number of receptions and touchdown lines and stuff like that. Jordan Addison's the next guy up. I actually feel good about Addison, right? Like trying to predict the Vikings pass catching totem pole on a week-to-week basis. He saw a shitload of targets last week. He just didn't really convert it into a lot of production. That ended up being Jalen Naylor. But I think Jordan Addison in this matchup against Chicago is actually a really good start this week, and I would definitely throw him back into my flex if I had him in my lineup. DJ Moore has been disappointing all year. He's had like 1 or 2 good games against soft defenses. He is a shaky flex at best. If DJ Moore does miss time, I think you can definitely get Luther Burden into your lineup as kind of like a fun shaky flex. But if DJ Moore is playing, then Luther Burden, no. Like despite him seeing a little bit of an increase in snaps last week, it's mainly because DJ Moore was in and out of the game. I don't know. We're in week 11 right now, and it just doesn't seem like Burden is such a big part of their game plan unless someone gets injured. So moving to Cincinnati at Pittsburgh. This is a 49.5 point total. The Bengals are 5.5 point underdogs. As we know, these two teams played a few weeks ago. Jamar Chase had 1,000 receptions, so we're just going to throw him into the must-start category. I like the matchup for T. Higgins as well. He's actually the wide receiver 6 in points per game since Joe Flacco has gone under center. So he's going to go right into the feels-good category. And honestly, you can make the argument that he should be in the must-start category because you got him. Like, you feel good about him right now. And the Steelers have allowed the single most fantasy points to the wide receiver position on the year. If we check out the injury reports, we do have Trey Hendrickson listed as doubtful. I believe him and Shamar Stewart are both likely to miss this game. So Cincinnati's defense is already terrible, and they're just going to continue to be terrible here. We do have a lot of defensive players for the Steelers DNP'd on Wednesday. We'll have to keep a close eye on that. I'm curious to see, they bring in Asante Samuel Jr., the Steelers do. They move Darius Slay to cornerback. So I wonder, you know, like, obviously they watched tape from last game and saw Jamar Chase get 20 plus targets. They're going to come out with some sort of different defensive scheme here to try to slow down Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I don't know what that could possibly be, but I'm sure there's going to be something there for you. DK Metcalf, I mean, he's just kind of bordered around the dub flex category. He has some good games, but more often than not, he's like a floor play of like 8 or 9, maybe 10 points. Just based on the matchup, though, I do like it. He will get a tough, like, personal matchup against DJ Turner, the cornerback for the Cincinnati Bengals. But overall, I don't think the Steelers are going to have any trouble moving the ball downfield. I think it'll be a very heavy running back centric game here, especially for Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, and those types of guys. But if I got DK against Cincinnati, he's going to be in my lineup. I don't think Calvin Austin's that terrible of a play either, because if DK Metcalf does end up getting shut down by DJ Turner, then Calvin Austin and probably the tight ends will get a little bit more work here. Moving down to Green Bay at the New York Giants. Let's check out some of the practice reports. We know Mr. Jameis Winston will get the start at quarterback for the New York Giants. In this one, Romeo Doubs, we have no concern there. Matt LaFleur came out yesterday and said that Romeo Doubs will be fine for Week 11, despite the chest injury he suffered last week. The start of the week, we had Darius Slayton start with a DNP. He pulled his hamstring, or kind of re-aggravated his hamstring a little bit last week on Sunday. Left the game, but that ended up coming back and finishing it. So I don't know that this is going to cause him to miss time, but it's clearly hampering him a little bit here. That's the only thing that I would probably press on. Obviously, with Jameis Winston under center, you're expecting a lot of pass attempts. The Wan'Dale Robinson's prop is up at 59.5. I think it's probably a combo of the uncertainty with Darius Slayton plus Jameis Winston being under center, of course. Anytime I see a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson, who's typically around like the 45 to 50 yard mark, that's going to be an easy under for me to take. Not going to be a guarantee, not going to smash every time, but I think more often than not, 60 to 65% of the time, that prop is going to go under just because naturally that's where that player ends up finishing a lot of the time. If Darius Slayton's out, this is probably a near lock, but I could also see a world where the Green Bay Packers defense just gets to Jameis Winston over and over again, and they just have a lot of trouble moving the ball. This is only a 7-point game between the Packers and the Giants, which feels a little weird. I would imagine a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Packers offensive line is really severely banged up right now, and the Giants' strength on defense is their defensive line, of course, with the pass rushers of Thibodeau and Abdul Carter and Brian Burns and everything like that. So maybe that's what they are expecting, and they are expecting a low-scoring game here, 42.5. So that would likely be the game script here. Wan'Dale, definitely a dub flex for me. The matchup makes me a little bit hesitant here, but overall, just a good outlook with Winston and a banged up Darius Slayton. Slayton will also get into the shaky flex category. If he's playing, can definitely start him. He gets a lot of deep passes. He's involved in the offense heavily. Romeo Doubs on the flip side, if he's healthy, he's feeling pretty good. I mean, he's been the most consistent receiver that they have in that offense. And I'm excited to see this passing game against a subpar defense without Tucker Kraft. And that didn't come out correctly. I mean, the wide receiver splits here. Like, I want to see what the ceiling of Dobbs and Christian Watson and those guys are while Tucker Kraft is no longer here. And we didn't get it last week because the Philadelphia defense just absolutely dominated the Packers. But Romeo Doubs, I'm going to throw him right into the dub flex category. And if I have him, there's a good chance I'm starting him this week. Underneath him, you got Watson as a shaky flex. I do like the idea of him connecting on a deep ball and having a high ceiling this game because of the matchup. Behind him, Matthew Golden might return. He's a rather not. He hasn't shown us much this year, but yeah, we can move on from there. Houston at Tennessee. We will get another week of Davis Mills. Him and Nico Collins had good chemistry. He had a very big game last week. A lot of it came on an end of half Hail Mary, but regardless, still would have had a pretty damn good game. Davis Mills showed pretty well, and this Tennessee Titans defense is horrendous here. So Nico's going to go into the must-start category. It looks like Calvin Ridley is going to return for the first time since a very long multi-week hamstring strain. As you can see, the Texans pass defense is pretty much the toughest matchup for fantasy wide receivers. Vegas's line for him is 34.5 with 2.5 receptions. I think first week off, listen, he's Calvin Ridley. He'll probably insert himself as the alpha immediately, but he's missed a lot of time. This is an incredibly tough matchup. I'm not going to throw him into the rather not. I think I'm going to throw him into the bottom of the shaky flex, although I'd probably rather start almost all the guys in here. And then behind Nico Collins, here's the problem with this receiving group. Like, Jaden Higgins' line is at 18.5 receiving yards. So we don't have a clear picture of how this wide receiver group is going to turn out. I'm almost more intrigued because I think we're just going to get a clear picture of what they're doing moving forward. I think the Texans felt like they made kind of like a conscious choice to move towards their youth. On offense last week, you saw Woody Marks get a huge share of the work in the backfield. You saw Jaden Higgins run the second most routes. Jalen Noel saw a big uptick in routes as well, even though he was still behind Christian Kirk. So you're seeing the young guys get more involved, but not to the point that we can trust any of them to get into the lineup. Will one of them have a good game or catch a touchdown? Yeah, maybe. But I think for right now, they're all pretty much going to go into the rather not, because we don't know on just a 1 week sample size where we should be going in our lineup. So in a sit-start league, I don't think you could trust any of the Houston receivers. Next up, we got the Chargers and we have Jacksonville. In Jacksonville, 43.5 point total, kind of gross. The Chargers are 3-point favorites here. Let's take a look at the practice reports because we do have to talk about some of the wide receivers here. And we did see Brian Thomas Jr. return to practice on a limited basis, so does not guarantee he returns, but feels like it's probably trending in the right direction, which would be big for this passing offense. No one ruled out yet. And, the Chargers receivers have continue to be a carousel behind Lad McConkey, who has really turned it up over the last month or so. I think he's pretty much been a top 10, if not top 5 wide receiver over the last 6 weeks of the season. So continue to roll him out in a really feels good capacity here. And then I think Quentin Johnson and Keenan Allen, listen, it's tough to decide which one of those two is going to get home. I do think Aranda Gatson is going to be fine for this week. He got back to a limited practice as well, despite the scare last week. That's a lie. He actually got back to a full practice. So he will be full steam ahead. And that does hurt the other pass catchers. But listen, if I have Keenan Allen, if I have Quentin Johnson, I think I feel relatively good about getting them into my lineup just because of what Justin Herbert can do on a weekly basis. And trying to play whack-a-mole with them is just a really tough ask here. Now, when we move to the other side of the ball, we got Trevor Lawrence, who's fucking abysmal. But we do have some pass catchers to talk about. Not De'Ami Brown. Travis Hunter is obviously out for the remainder of the season. Jacoby Myers, the newcomer, didn't run a lot of routes, only caught a single pass last week, so I don't expect him to be very involved this week. Throw him into the rather not. Parker Washington has played really, really well. Brian Thomas Jr., if he comes back, will be probably heavily targeted, but the Chargers' passing defense is significantly better than their rush defense. As you can see, dead last in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position, bottom 4 in EPA per pass allowed. So it's a tough matchup for BTJ. It's a tough matchup for Parker Washington. I still think I'm going to throw BTJ at the bottom of the dub flex category because, listen, when the targets get condensed and these other receivers are hurt, BTJ typically, even if they look sloppy or they don't convert, he'll have 8 to 10 targets in the game, and it's just hard to replicate that. So Parker Washington, maybe he's just more effective than the other guys down the stretch, and him and T-Law for sure have a legit chemistry. But I do think as soon as like legit pass catchers are on the field, he takes such a back seat. So P-Wash, I think you could start him if you need to, but he's going to go into the shaky flex category for me. Tampa Bay at Buffalo. So we did get, I believe, Chris Godwin returning to a limited practice on Wednesday. Him and Bucky did, but they're both listed as doubtful, and I believe they're both going to miss this game. So it's business as usual for the pass catchers here. Emeka Egbuka only being at 62.5 receiving yards feels a little crazy to me. I think I'm about to hit the over on that right now. Yeah, we're doing that right now on BetMGM. As always, if you are not on MGM yet, they are our premier sponsor. And not only if you get on there and brick your first couple bets, will you get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets, but you can get access to the BDGE weekly rankings, waiver wire rankings, and then private live stream for sit starts over the weekend. That is the Big Dog membership. And if you deposit just $10 or more using code BDGE on the MGM app or the MGM website, wherever you prefer, and play any slip on there, I've already hit, I guess, Wan'Dale Robinson under and the Emeka Egbuka over. As soon as you play any slip, they're going to hit you with a promo code in-app that you can use on bdge.co to get 3 months free of the Big Dog membership. So Egbuka, I get it. The Buffalo pass defense has actually looked significantly better, especially since their first round rookie Maxwell Harrison has returned. But who the fuck are we kidding here? He's going to go in there. Shakir continues to be a top option in this offense with Dalton Kincaid out. Keon Coleman had a touchdown, had a big play last week, but he's been so inconsistent and typically has an extremely low floor. So he's going to go into the shaky flex category. Underneath Emeka Egbuka, you got Tez Johnson, who has been converting at a really high rate. It feels like it's a little bit fluky, but when he gets it done on a week-to-week basis, week in, week out, sometimes it's volume, sometimes it's big plays, sometimes it's touchdowns. I don't want to go and dive too much into like, oh, it's garbage time, oh, it's fluky this, fluky that. He just continues to run a shitload of routes and continues to put up really high fantasy totals. And this is a 48.5 point total here. The Bucs are 5.5 point underdogs, so expect them to have to pass the ball a decent amount here, especially with Bucky Irving out again. So Tez is going to go into the dub flex category. He's just been playing so well. Seattle at the LA Rams. Game of the week here. We've got a 48.5 point total. We have the Seattle Seahawks as 3-point underdogs here. These are two very, very tough defenses. Devontae Adams started the week off with a DMP, although Sean McVay, I believe, came out and said he expects him to play this week, so I'm not overly concerned about that. JSN with an insane line over 100 yards. Puka Nacua at 87.5. Both of them are going into the must start. Devontae Adams, despite a relatively tough matchup, they're easier to pass against than they are to run against. Devontae just scores a touchdown every single week, so he goes into the feels good category. Rashid Shaheed and the Seahawks wide receiver group is a little tougher. He did not play a full complement of snaps last week in his first game since being traded to the Seahawks. It was JSN as a full-time player. Cooper Kupp had 69% of the routes, and Rashid Shaheed ran 62% of the routes. So a decent chunk, and it was a blowout, so like it's hard to get a real feel on what that would have been like, but I do expect Shaheed to take another jump up. Cooper Kupp did return, made one big play, but he's not really a factor in this offense, so I'm not like racing out to get Shaheed into my lineup, especially not in this matchup, but I do think they will eventually start taking shots downfield, especially in a game where they're really going to have to compete here, and Darnold's going to have to show up and take shots downfield if they want to compete with the Rams. And then maybe there's some revenge narrative here. Maybe Cooper Kupp is pissed that they let him walk. They didn't give him the deal. We're going to throw him into the dub flex, or the shaky flex category, excuse me. San Francisco at Arizona. So some moving parts here. Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously out with the appendicitis, I believe. That leaves Michael Wilson as the alpha in the receiver room, but he's never been one that like shifts the defense. He's not someone that's probably going to like have a blow up game or a ceiling game. I do think he has a decent floor, and I do think you can definitely get him into your lineup if you are desperate. I'm going to throw him right into the shaky flex category. Vegas has his line at 41.5 receiving yards, which is higher than Keenan Allen. So again, you could do worse, but I'm not dying to get him in. There's not really such thing as a handcuff receiver, although Brissett has, been on fire, and I just think this means Trey McBride gets somewhere north of 48 targets in this game. On the flip side, we do have some kinks to work out here. We have Brock Purdy returning to what they're calling an aggressive practice, and it does seem like unless there is some sort of setback or unless there is a change of heart, Brock Purdy is pacing to play in this one. I don't think statistically for the pass catchers it matters a whole lot because Mac Jones has put up good passing statistics and it hasn't really affected any receiver one way or another. Juwan Jennings has clearly been getting healthier and healthier and playing really well and scoring touchdowns and racking up receiving yards and being a top target on this team, obviously. And him and Purdy have a really good chemistry. So I expect Juwan Jennings to have a strong game. George Kittle's obviously posed to have a strong game. And then the other factor here is Ricky Pearsall. He returned to a limited practice as well on Wednesday. Now, he has missed like 6 weeks at this point. So I don't think the return to practice means it's a guarantee he gets back onto the field this week. If he does, it is a good matchup against the Cardinals. So I wouldn't blame anyone who's been hanging on to him for this long to get him into their lineups. That being said, first game back off this long layoff typically means you're going to be in that like 60 to 70% snap range. So I have him closer to a shaky flex. Definitely, near the top if he does play. Because if he does play, that means he's obviously ready. They've waited a very long time because he wasn't ready up to this point. So if they're putting him out onto the field, he's going to be relatively near full health at this point. So shaky flex, but definitely towards the top of it. And I'd feel okay about having him in my lineup just because of the explosive nature of who he is as a player, plus the game script here, 48.5 point total. Expected to see a lot of points in this one. Baltimore at Cleveland. Baltimore 7.5 point favorites, 39.5 point total in this game. Last time these two teams played, Lamar Jackson went kind of crazy, scored 4 passing touchdowns, I believe. So Zay Flowers, he's not a guy that you need to flip flop on and off of. He's just a guy that you throw into the feels good category and you kind of leave him there for the entirety of the season. Gives you a very high floor. Hasn't seen as many spike games. Obviously, Lamar's been in and out of the lineup, and it felt like he was going to blow the top off beginning parts of the season, and that's how fantasy works, right? Like your opinion should not just come from 1 or 2 weeks. There is 17 games to be played, so Zay Flowers came back to earth, and he is the player that we know him to be. And that's where Zay Flowers is at. Rashad Bateman is likely to miss this game with a high ankle sprain, which would open up targets for, some guys behind him. Like D-Hop will probably see 40 to 50% of the routes. Devontae Walker might see 40 to 50% of the routes. No one that I want in my lineup. For Cleveland, we do have a relatively good matchup against the Ravens, at least theoretically, but in the last few weeks, we've obviously seen the Ravens defense perform a lot better. Marlon Humphrey's playing good ball again. Kyle Hamilton's playing good ball. Nate Wiggins is playing good ball. And now that I look at the injury report, I didn't realize that Marlon Humphrey was going to be out with a finger injury. Okay, yeah, he had surgery on his finger and will miss Sunday's game versus Cleveland. Regardless, this is just not a passing offense I want to invest in at all. Jerry Jeudy's line is at 39.5. He's basically had one good game, and that was last week against the Jets, and I am not trying to double down on that. He'll be at the bottom of the shaky flex tier, along with everybody else in this offense. I think Cedric Tillman, until he proves something, is at the rather not category as well. KC at Denver. We've got a 3.5 point game here in favor of the Chiefs, 44.5 point total. The Broncos are obviously an incredible defense, as are the Chiefs. You see all red through and through here. Rashee Rice, we're not thinking twice. Courtland Sutton's been much more on and off recently. Started really strong, had a ton of consistency, and then it's kind of dropped off over the last 3 to 4 weeks. And it's opened up things for Troy Franklin to the point where Franklin's actually at 4.5 receptions in Vegas, where Sutton's at 3.5, and Sutton's line is 10 yards higher, 50.5. So with the matchup, with the environment, with the way Bo Nix is playing, Sutton's going to find himself in the dub flex tier. I still believe in him very much as a player, but it hasn't looked great. So until something switches, I guess he's going to kind of get into that wide receiver 3-ish conversation. Troy Franklin will get into the shaky flex tier. Xavier Worthy is going to be the same thing for me in the shaky flex tier. He just has not been good since Rashee Rice has returned. Moving to Sunday Night Football, we've got Detroit at Philadelphia, a 46.5 point total here. The Lions are 2.5 point underdogs. Don't matter. Amon-Ra forever in the must-start category. And then Devontae and A.J. Brown. Listen, Devontae has outplayed A.J. Brown all season. It's just been the way that this season has gone so far. We look at the practice reports here. A lot of DNPs for the Lions. Again, it's probably mainly veteran rest, but Terran Arnold, concussion, DNP. Aiden Hutchinson, DNP. Kirby Joseph, DNP. Sam Laporta, DNP. So we'll have to see Thursday practice reports. But, if they do miss Terran Arnold or Kirby Joseph, that's going to be a big uptick to these Philadelphia pass catchers. And the Detroit Lions pass defense can definitely be had. As you can see, the 11th most fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Overall, very good defense in general, but I'm going to throw A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in the dub flex category. And I think at this point, you just have to rank Devontae Smith over A.J. Brown. And then we got Jameson Williams. I think a lot of talk this week has obviously been made about Dan Campbell taking back over play calling duties. And Dan Campbell's in love with Jameson Williams. So there was no surprise that JMO had a very big game in the first game in which Dan Campbell has been back under the helm calling the plays. And I think we're going to continue to see that. Their uptick in play action passes skyrocketed. His target skyrocketed, his production skyrocketed. So I don't think that was just a random coincidence. However, it is a tough matchup because he plays on the outside, so he'll see a lot of Quinyon Mitchell, whereas Amon-Ra St. Brown will play in the slot, see some Cooper, all that kind of stuff. He'll get his. JMO going forward is a dude that I would love to have on my team with Dan Campbell calling the plays again. But for this week in particular, it's just a little bit of a tough matchup. He's almost definitely going to be in my lineup if I have him, but he's definitely more towards the dub flex tier than he is the feels good tier for now. And then the last game of the slate, we've got Dallas at the Raiders. We got Dallas coming off of their bye. This is a 50.5 point total. Dallas 3.5 point favorites. We got CD as a must start. We got George Pickens as a must start. And the other side of the ball, we had an absolute dud from Geno Smith and the Raiders going against the Broncos on Thursday Night Football last week. Geno did get banged up because this is a Monday night game. We don't have any practice reports yet, but I think he should be fine. Tyler Lockett ended up being the leading receiver here. The matchup is so good that you want to start someone outside of Brock Bowers, but typically they just run a lot of 12 personnel. So it's a lot of Bowers. It's a lot of Michael Mayer. Ashton Genty's catching 4, 5, 6 passes per game as well. So doesn't always mean a receiver has to get home. So I think Tucker, Vegas does have him at 48.5, which is higher than Khalil Shakir, higher than Keenan Allen, higher than Quentin Johnson, right underneath Romeo Doubs, the same thing as Jameson Williams. So I do think based on the matchup, Trey Tucker's not a bad start. I do look at him as more of a shaky flex guy, closer to the top of this tier for sure. Like I'd much rather start him than like a Calvin Austin type or Calvin Ridley type or something like that. But I don't look at him in the same vein as Devontae Smith or those types of guys. But we've seen Trey Tucker's upside on a given week where he can kind of explode. And if there's going to be a matchup to take advantage of, this would be it for the Dallas Cowboys. So you don't want to start him, but you can definitely do worse. I think that's probably the same with Tyler Lockett against the Cowboys as well. And there's nobody else in this game that I want in my lineup. So we'll go into poster mode so you hoes can see all of these receivers. We'll stop right there. You've got the must starts, feels good, dub flex, shaky flex, rather nots. And of course, all of these rankings are up right now in real time on bdge.co for all the big dog members. You can go sign up straight to the website, bdge.co, or the cheapest way, just deposit $10 on MGM, the app or the website. Use code BDGE when you do so if you're a first-time depositor. Play any slip on the site, and they will automatically send you a promo code to use on bdge.co to get 3 months free of the big dog membership. All right, we're moving into the playoffs. This shit matters. It means something to me, dog. All right, let's go have a big day. I love y'all. Thank you for hanging out with me today, and I'll leave you with the smoochies. Mwah.